It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
We're the Insiders. So Scott, this U.S. Senate race with Hovde and Baldwin, how do you think it's progressing and where do you think it's headed?
Well, I think this race is still close. And I'm actually impressed with, and as well as national people are, that when Hovde was matching his spending to what Baldwin was spending, the race was essentially a dead heat, or he was just 2 or 3 points behind. So he showed people that if he had the resources, that he could make a race out of this. She has, though, poured the cash on now as her allies, and she's outspending him on television by 2 and some nights 3 to 1. And as a result, Senator Baldwin has widened the lead, and it depends what poll you're looking at, whether it's 4 points or 7 points, but she has been widening the lead. But I think that's simply because of the difference in resources that are being spent. Late in August, I think you will see a bunch of national groups come in and start to spend money on behalf of Hovde. This is already the 5th highest spending U.S. Senate race in the nation. I mean, to think that Wisconsin, where we all thought Tammy Baldwin was probably on cruise control to a win, is a seat where the 5th largest amount of spending is occurring in the country, suggests that there are people on both sides who think this, the Dems think they got to protect it, and the Republicans think this is doable compared to the races in Montana and West Virginia and Pennsylvania, where you would expect the spending to be out of control. So I think that you'll see the mismatch in resources begin to close. You'll see the race begin to close. To some extent, it's very difficult in a presidential year for Baldwin to rack up the sort of margin that she had in a gubernatorial year earlier. There's a lot more people walking around with a team jersey on who are just going to vote straight tickets in a presidential year than you get in a gubernatorial year. So as long as the presidential race in Wisconsin stays close, I think this U.S. Senate race stays close. It favors Baldwin, but it is within reach for Hovde as long as the presidential race stays close.
I obviously have a different take on this than Scott does. I think the reason that Hovde in some polls, and only in some polls, got somewhat close was because the Biden effect was having a real drag on the ticket. You'll notice that, you know, it was clearly a problem for a lot of people. We have exactly the opposite now. There's a huge advantage to the ticket. But even with that, Tammy Baldwin's ads are outstanding. They're the best ads that I've seen, both when she ran before and when she's running now. She shows empathy at a time when people need empathy and want empathy, and they're not getting that from their politicians. I think she's very smart, and so are the people who are putting her ad campaign together to get that done. I also think she's got a consistent set of values that she's supporting. She's doing a good job of emphasizing specific things like the reduction in the costs for healthcare for people. I think it's important that you do that. She's done that. She's also running some very good ads against Eric Hovde. And I think that what's going to happen here is Tammy Baldwin will win easily. I think she will run about 5% above the top of the ticket. So if Donald Trump were to really do a great job and win by 1, Tammy Baldwin's still going to be winning very substantially. I would predict she'll be somewhere, if I really wanted to be conservative on it, somewhere between 6 and 10%. That's where Tammy will end up as the win. And I don't think that anything that Hovde can do will have any substantial impact on that, because she will be able to match them dollar for dollar, and she runs great ads, and I think people believe her, and they should. She's a really good, honorable candidate who does very good things for the people of the state of Wisconsin.
Well, I think Hovde's finally starting to get some traction in the last week or two with a pivot in his message. He's been criticizing her on individual things, but now he has sort of an overarching message that I think is more likely to be effective, which is that we've been sending Tammy Baldwin to Washington, D.C. for 25 years. The place is worse than when she started. What has she brought home? I think that's an easy message at a time when people are feeling anti-Washington, feeling we need change. We need disruption to the way things have gone in the past. It's fairly easy to feed into that with an anti-incumbent campaign. So there's a lot of incumbents who should be a little nervous around the country this year. You've even seen in primaries some incumbents have trouble, and so I would say that the Baldwin camp shouldn't sleep too soundly here, because I do think that this is a race that can come into play here in the final couple of months.
Well, I think Scott makes a good point. That is the right way to attack incumbents this year because people are tired. But that's why I think one of the reasons why I think the Baldwin campaign is so good. She is very good about bringing in specific Wisconsin people who benefited directly from actions that Tammy Baldwin took to make things better, whether it's on opioids or things like that, or bringing down healthcare costs. She's really doing a good job of making sure she connects and shows how she did bring home the bacon, not just to Wisconsin, but to you individually. Nothing better than having a person talking to you, having Tammy Baldwin sitting there holding her hand and empathetically listening. And that person has already narrated and told you that Tammy Baldwin took care of her problem. That's the empathy that people are looking for. That's why she's going to do so much better than a lot of other candidates out there. And that's why Eric Hovde is fighting an impossible uphill battle.
I don't know. We're going to see here in the weeks ahead.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.